Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Taking the Lead, where we interview some of the top leaders in public relations and communications. And we don't talk all that much about PR and communications, it's mostly about leadership. And that's what we're going to do today, as we always do. So, I want to tell you just a little bit about today's guest. Gail Heimann is CEO of Weber Shandwick, and she's led the agency to just too many honors to count, from PR Week and Provoke Media and Ad Age, and including, is this right, winning nearly 100 Cannes Lions. That's just remarkable. She's been inducted into PR Week's inaugural Hall of Fame, recognizing women trailblazers in communications. That was in 2016. I so wish we didn't have that Hall of Fame, or didn't need it. Someday we won't, but it's still, an honor to be in there. And I think with that, we're going to introduce you to Gail Heimann.
Thank you, Ken. And thank you for the lovely, lovely introduction. I too wish we didn't need the Hall of Fame, and I think we're not going to need it. Hopefully soon. But thank you, and it's nice to be with you. I mean, we determined we've known each other for decades,
Decade.
and due to the miracle of Facebook, we're in each other's vortex right
It's
now. So
it's
and that's fantastic.
yeah, it is nice to be in your vortex. And thank goodness for Zoom. Could you imagine what would we have done in these last 2.5 years without
No,
Zoom? So
we would be more isolated than we were for sure.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
thank
All
you.
right, we're gonna dig right in. How's
Okay,
about
let's
that?
dig.
So, many have accused the PR industry, and specifically agencies, of, let's face it, dragging its feet when it comes to bringing true DE&I to our industry. How do you answer that charge?
Well, for sure. I mean, I can answer it very simply. We are not nearly where we should be as an industry. And I would answer that for Weber Shandwick as well. We have made progress at Weber Shandwick, but we need to make much, much, much more progress. When I think about it, I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think we have to address it really from two simple places that are ultimately complicated places. One from a structural place and the other from a cultural place. And when we look at structural, and as we think about it at Weber Shandwick, it's addressing, how do we recruit people? How do we onboard people? How do we evaluate people? How do we promote people? Even very basic things. Where does someone sit in an organization? Right now we're hybrid, but when you think about it, where you sit in an organization affords you access to other people. And so how do you think about all of that in a way that is hugely equitable? So what we're doing is looking at all of that and both and restructuring the way we work, and we've been doing that over the past several years and are making progress there. When you think about the cultural piece, and that many of us in our industry, and certainly Weber Shandwick, are addressing via training people at the management level, training people at all levels to be inclusive in the way we act and treat each other, and that's important. But I think one of the things that gets said in our industry and other industries as well is to get to full inclusion. And we have made a statement at Weber Shandwick that I believe is hugely important, that we want to be the most inclusive organization in our industry. So we are working towards that. But what gets said is it has to come from the top, and it does. You have to believe, you have to want to make it happen, and you have to push to make it happen. And that's certainly within me and with all of our leadership team. But it also, I think, has to be grassroots. You have to feel it within the fiber of the organization. So one of the things that we're doing is these calls, which we have on a regular basis, where people can get on, whoever they are, to address whatever issues may be happening, or sometimes no issues, just to talk. And those kinds of connections, and it's called time to connect calls, those kinds of connections people make. Sometimes 500 people will be on a call discussing an issue, discussing how they feel. Other things we're doing, BRGs, which we have a number of BRGs, and they're really important. And those, we are paying the individuals individuals who are heading up those BRGs to make sure that people realize this is a substantive and important role within our organization. And I'm proud that we were the first in our industry to talk about the stats as it relates to diversity in our organization. And we publish those stats on an annual basis early in the year, and hold ourselves very accountable for changing the level of diversity in our organization. And certainly, I think are very vocal about what the industry should be doing. So to answer your question, are we there? No, absolutely not. Is there more we can do? Yes. And we're very committed to do that.
Well, it sounds it. And I think you're right. It is such a complex issue. There aren't easy fixes. For me, of so much of what you said resonated, but especially what you said at the end. You've got to be honest by listing your statistics and by being accountable and showing not just the world and but showing your current team this is how we're doing is really important.
Yeah.
And I imagine that says something to potential employees who say this is an organization willing to put it out there. So
we have to. And you listen, if you think about the industry as well, in the horrific murder of George Floyd and the events of 2020, many made statements, right? And this is now we are in a time of real accountability. We have to be accountable for what we said and what we're doing on a daily basis. And I think that's important. Hugely.
Absolutely. So, as we sort of hinted at earlier, you're one of the few women CEOs of a global communications agency. I don't know if it's 4 or 5. It's not enough. Clearly, we've got lots to do in this area of bringing women into top positions, right? And what's your plan to accelerate that, whether at Weber or more globally, within the
hopefully in the world. Hopefully in the world, Ken, I'm gonna accelerate it. But for sure, it's paradoxical almost, right? Because public relations is an industry that is 70% women. Weber Shandwick is 70% women. I am proud that our executive leadership team is also 70% women. Our senior leadership team is 57% women. So I think Weber Shandwick historically has done incredibly well there. And I'm very proud of that. The piece that I think is important, and I think there's 2 pieces that I think we have to be focused on, and this came about obviously in COVID, much changed. Among the things that we all know is that women stepped out of the workforce at greater numbers than did men. I think the stat that Politico reported in 2021 was 1.8 million women stepped out of the workforce. So that's a huge stat, right? And for us, for any of us in a leadership position in this industry, we've got to look at that and think, what do we have to do to be the kind of environments that bring women back to the workforce? Those who chose to step out, those who had to step out. We need to bring those women back. We're losing that kind of talent, that kind of genius, that kind of brilliance. So I think we have to be focused for sure on that. The other piece, and this sort of rests deeply within me. If you look at the top of the advertising marketing world, if you look at holding companies, right, those are men. And if you look at the top of many agencies and historically across the ad marketing space, including PR, historically there have been men at the top. I think, and I have no data to support it, I think that there's a little bit because those people have come out of an operations environment, an operations background. I think in many cases, the women, the 70% who are the workforce of public relations, aren't exposed necessarily to training around operations, right? We're doing great work for our clients in the different facets of our business, but we're not being deliberately, intentionally schooled in operations, which I think would give women a faster and better shot to get to some of those top spots. So that's something that we're looking at and very conscious of at Weber Shandwick, because I think that's really important to the rise of women to those top positions.
And you're absolutely right. With any of these things we could be discussing, with any of these things we say we all want to change, it is about being intentional, and it is about having a plan. It is about taking action. If not, it's just so much talk, which I think, to some degree, the industry's been accused of too much talk, not enough action. I think some of that's deserved, honestly. So
no, I think but I think there was with everything, all of the crises that we endured from 2020 to 2021, I think our industry, and I think others too, have really looked at those things differently and have recognized that talk is not enough. It is about action for sure, for all of our constituencies and particularly for our employee population.
Yeah, and especially at a time where, if employees or potential employees don't like what they see, they have opportunities to be vocal about it, right? Everyone's a publisher. Everyone's been a publisher for 20 years or whatever. So, I think the risk of being caught talking and not taking action is very real. Though I hope the desire for action comes from somewhere more sincere than just, ooh, if we don't, we're going to be found out. Hopefully we're doing it for the right reasons. So, as an industry, we are actually great at training team members to be superb practitioners of communications. To your point, not so good at business and operations. Are we truly doing enough to develop them as leaders of people, as leaders of human beings? The ability to inspire and have trust and have followership. What's the gap here and what are the solutions?
Well, obviously, it's a big question. Are we doing enough? Can one ever do enough? I guess is always a question, but I don't want to address a question with a question. I think we're doing a lot of the right things. I think we've realized the importance in leadership of empathy, and the notion of leading by listening. And I think it's never been more important than today. Again, when I look at what we're doing at Weber Shandwick, we're very focused on wellness and mental health, and giving people at a management level the tools they need to shape an organization that is about listening and hearing and understanding. And that, like other things in our world, requires training and requires thought. So we're doing that. I think we're doing some other initiatives that we're focused on are around being more consultative, more thoughtful in how we do things. That's certainly on a client basis, creating a degree of depth and understanding, but also in terms of our employee populations and getting in and really listening harder. And so I think those kinds of things are critical for us as we move forward and we think about leadership differently from leading the work. It's about leading the people.
Well, we always say you manage the work, you manage the production schedule, you manage the budgets and getting the proverbial train out of the station on time, but you lead people. It's such a different endeavor. If I could just add to that, I mean, I think if we really want a generation primed for leadership, having them go through emotional intelligence, assessment and work. And I'm not an EI coach, so there's nothing, self-serving about this. But I know that if we want to be better leaders, truly understanding EI as it's defined by the founders and not the founders of the country, who may not have been very emotional.
No, not the founders of the country.
The founders of the idea of emotional intelligence, and take that assessment. I will tell you, I took the assessment. And I always say it was like a blueprint of this and this. It was frightening how well it knew me. So it's a very easy assessment.
Yeah, it's a great thought. It's a great thought.
Yeah, it's really worth it. Okay. I love to ask a question that is specific to the guest. And this is one. When I think of you, and I think this is your well-earned reputation, we think creativity. We think one of our industry's leaders who doesn't just get the business and the growth and the clients, but creativity. So you've been an advocate for solving through idea creation. What does that really, two-part question, what does that really mean? And if there's someone who wants to be more creative, whatever that means, what do they do? Where do they start?
Okay, two-part question.
Uh-oh.
Listen, thank you for that part of the intro, right? I'm always flattered, and I have for years been an advocate for ideas as the core of everything, right? It's what gets us up in the morning. It's why we love this business. It's what we deliver for clients. It's what creates impact in the world. So it's hugely important. It's hugely important to me. I think when we think about, look at the world that we've inhabited for the last few decades, and everything has changed, right? Technologies, platforms, channels, everything, every possible thing has changed. But the one thing that hasn't changed is then you need an idea at the core of whatever it is you do, right? Whether it's a corporate issue, whether it's something in the world of consumer marketing or healthcare marketing, it doesn't matter where in our business you go, where you travel. It really is about an idea. So I'm a big believer. And you asked how does one summon ideas, and that's kind of changed too over time in what we did. And now we certainly have a lot of tools and data above all at our disposal to help us think better and perhaps get to insights more clearly. All of that is good. One of the things that I feel strongly about is culture, and what our clients want and need from us is a path to get ideas that resonate in culture. We have a process at Weber Shandwick that we're rolling out strategically, and it's talking about being in culture, that it's not enough anymore to simply reflect culture, that one actually has to move culture in some fashion for a client, that a client should add value to the culture, not just be reflective of what's going on, and that we're able to do that. And this gets to a little bit to your question. We're able to do that because we sit at the intersection of what shapes culture. So it's easy to think, okay, culture just happens, OMG, people suddenly have tats, or they're eating this kind of thing, or they're reading this kind of thing, and that's sort of cultural ether. But the reality is, when you think about it, culture is being shaped by this convergence of technology and media and policy and society, all those things coming together. Think of what TikTok has done for culture, right? So culture just doesn't happen. It's kind of made really in that convergence. So I think what Weber Shandwick does is it works at that intersection, therefore understands how culture is shaped. And that would be my recommendation to anybody who's looking to summon up ideas that resonate, is be in those places and spaces, get what's going on, understand culture. And from there, again, more complicated than that, but from there you can begin to make ideas that add value to the culture. And I think that's really important. I think that's what, all of us, who may be listening have clients and projects, but that's what we need to deliver. For sure.
So are you saying I've got to start doing TikTok videos? Because that's a little
Yeah,
frightening. It's a little frightening.
And doing them, or just going through that rabbit hole and watching them all, because once you start, it's very hard to stop.
I know. All right. Last question. You worked for many years with one of our most downloaded guests on Taking the Lead, Andy Polansky. Andy Polansky Mensch is what I call him.
Yep.
And how did you imprint while working for someone, who's such a visible leader, and how have you imprinted since taking over the reins 3 years ago or so?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I consider myself extremely, extraordinarily lucky to have worked with Andy for 27 years. We celebrated Andy's accomplishments at the end of June as he retired, and we had an event and we called it the Andy Effect, and all of us talked about the Andy Effect. We had his face printed on some paddleball paddles as well, but. And the Andy Effect, I've got to say, for me, has been extraordinary. I mean, my mentor, my friend, the greatest combination of business savvy and genius, and just being a true humanist, a true consummate humanist. And so that's been important to me. And you talk about imprint. Andy and I, we're partners. I think partners. I think we probably each have slightly different approaches, maybe, or skill sets, but super compatible in the way we worked, and we each were able to imprint, I think, in a different way across our organization, and that helped create a foundation for what I'm doing. And I think to get to that, my imprint is hopefully transformation. I mean, continued transformation. All of us have to transform in this industry. My view is we've got to transform in a way that leads this industry. And most recently, our relaunch as the Weber Shandwick Collective, and our thinking about and bringing to bear and expressing the intentionality of creating a network of specialist brands and bringing it together with Weber Shandwick at the center as the hero brand. and being the leading earn first network, because that's what our clients want and need now. So I hope that that imprint, again, Andy helped lay the foundation for sure. And there's no more extraordinary professional experience than the one I had working with Andy. But ultimately, continuing to move our organization forward and taking ourselves and the industry into the next dimension of what we can deliver. So I hope that's my input.
Not a small challenge, but
Not a small challenge.
I'm gonna guess you're up to it. Anyway, it has been a joy to spend time with you to share your wisdom for those who come to taking the lead. So I want to thank you again, and we're going to make a very public commitment. Let it not be 20 years till we see one another in person again.
I am
We
committed.
got to figure out a way. Okay, folks, you heard it. You heard it. We're going to hold
Committed.
on to that.
Committed.
Anyway, thank you so much, Gail. Really appreciate having you on Taking the Lead. For everyone else, please keep coming back. And of course, please keep taking the lead. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken.